Hello everybody, it is Brian for GadgetUnit.com, and in this video I'll be bringing you my top-down review of the Samsung Galaxy S4 Active. In the United States, this phone is available exclusively on AT&T as an upgrade or as a new 2-year agreement. Of course, this phone will cost you in the $500 range if you decide to purchase this full price and off contract. So in my unboxing, I said that I was going to do a pro level review with, slow moving pans and things like that. However, I'm still a big believer in these classic top-down style reviews because to me that best represents what the actual user is going to be experiencing themselves. So first, let's start off with the specs of this device. Like the original S4, this uses a Qualcomm Snapdragon 600 quad-core processor, which is clocked at 1.9 gigahertz. It has 2 gigabytes of low-power DDR3 memory, 16 gigs of internal storage. There's a micro SD card slot under the back cover, and that supports up to 64 gigabytes of additional storage. It has a 2600 milliamp hour user replaceable battery, and the display on this device is 5 inches with the resolution of 1080 by 1920. Now this display is not AMOLED, this is TFT. So what this gives you is still some pretty good and vivid colors and excellent viewing angles. But compared to AMOLED, one huge advantage is that this works much better outdoors and in direct sunlight. Whereas with the AMOLED S4, it was really difficult to use that device outdoors in direct sunlight, even with the brightness turned up all the way. So that to me is a huge upside to getting the Active over the actual S4. Now compared to the original S4, in terms of physical dimensions, this device is a little heavier, it's a little wider, and it's a little bit taller. But so if you thought that the S4 was a little bit hard to hold in your hand, this phone will be a little more difficult to hold, especially if you decide to get a case for this device. Now continuing on with the specs, the display also has Gorilla Glass 2, not Gorilla Glass 3, but regardless, the display on the phone is still quite durable. Onto the cameras, the rear-facing camera is 8 megapixels and there's an LED flash right below that. Now the S4 uses a 13 megapixel camera, so there is a bit of a decrease in terms of the sensor size, but photos still look great, colors are pretty accurate, images are sharp. In low light situations though, it could be better. If you do use the low light mode, you will get a little better looking image. Video quality is also quite good. Now, in regards to the front-facing camera, that one is 2 megapixels, just like the regular S4. And in terms of the software, this of course uses Android 4.2.2 Jelly Bean with Samsung's TouchWiz user interface. So that's it with the specs, and for a little while, let me just talk about the design and the hardware. So the majority of the phone does use plastic, although the phone feels very solidly built. I can imagine this lasting a very long time as long as you're careful with the device, of course. But I mean, this thing feels very solid in the hand. I can't imagine this just simply breaking on you anytime soon. The design on the front at least looks very much like the original Galaxy S4, except when you get towards the bottom. So the S4 has a physical home button. My camera would focus in on this. So the S4 had a physical home button and touch, back, and menu keys, whereas on the Active we have all physical buttons. These do not light up in the background, which I think is unfortunate for when you're in low light situations. So I would have liked to see these buttons actually light up. However, they do offer a fairly good amount of feedback when you are pressing these buttons. Speaking of the buttons, on the right side we do have the power button. There is sort of a rough texture to it, so you're easily able to feel it and press it. Now, compared to the S4, the buttons on the Active are much more clickier than on the S4, which I think is fantastic. Same goes for the volume buttons. It has that same texture, and these are slightly more clickier than the power button. It's kind of nice. On the top of the phone, we do have our 3.5mm headphone jack, our top microphone, and our infrared blaster. And on the bottom, we do have a covered USB port, as well as another microphone pinhole to the left of that. On the back, of course, we do have our camera, flash, speaker opening here. Let me go ahead and take off the back cover to show you what that looks like. It's a little bit different than most because this does have a gasket on it, as you can see. And since this is the active, this phone is dust proof and waterproof of up to 1 meter, which converted to feet is, let me go ahead and see this real quick, 3.28 feet. So that is the maximum recommended depth in terms of water. And the camera application actually has a dedicated aqua mode, which lets you take a little better looking photos when underwater. I did test this underwater a couple of times, and the phone made it out just fine. I did experience a couple of small issues with the headphone jack, where it would just constantly think that I was plugging in and unplugging a headphone device. A reboot pretty much fixed that. I did notice some liquid getting into the various contact points where the back cover snaps onto the phone itself, but no moisture got into the more critical areas of the phone, which I think is more important. So for the most part, you shouldn't really be taking this underwater on a constant basis. You're not going to be taking this diving with you, of course, but if you accidentally drop this into the pool or something, you should most likely be okay. So here obviously is the battery, micro SD card slot, and our SIM card slot. So all of your typical things are there. Let's go ahead and put the back cover back on. Many more points of contact than the regular S4. And there's one there, and I think that's about it. Alright, so everything is securely closed. So I've already talked about the display. Now, the pixel density on this device is quite good, meaning that text and images are very crisp and clear. So that is nice. That's pretty much a standard thing of new smartphones nowadays. In terms of some of the more typical smartphone things, such as your speaker quality and your network and call quality, the speaker on the back is okay. It gets plenty loud, but it can easily become distorted if you turn the volume up quite a bit. So I would use it for lower level casual listening and maybe audio tracks or some light music here and there. Of course, you're going to want to use headphones for extended listening, but the speaker otherwise is decent. Call quality, of course, varies by carrier, but for this phone, it was just fine. The earpiece gave you loud, clear audio. In terms of network performance, obviously, this is going to vary depending on your carrier. For me, AT&T's 4G LTE network has always been pretty stable and fast. In some areas, I've been able to get close to 70 megabits per second down, and on average, I was getting at least 25 to 30. So, of course, that's going to depend on your carrier and area. Let's talk about software real quick. This phone uses Android 4.2.2 Jelly Bean, and with that comes Samsung's TouchWiz interface. So this gives you a custom interface as opposed to the stock Android ROM. Much of what Samsung has done here is pretty good, giving you some nice little extra features. Some of these gimmicky features, though, include Air View, Air Gesture, and Smart Stay. And to be honest, I did not test those at all because most people will most likely not be using those. At least when they first get their device, they'll be using it, but afterwards, they'll probably not ever go to those again. But Samsung's interface isn't too bad. I really do not like what they did with the settings application by adding everything into tabs up the top. Sometimes it's hard to find something specific, you forget where they are. But overall, Samsung's interface is pretty nice, and it's really not as intrusive as previous versions of TouchWiz. So overall, Samsung's iteration here is not too bad. Although I will say that if I did have this device for my own self, I would probably root it so I could get rid of all the stock AT&T bloatware, because there is quite a bit of it. And unfortunately, at least at the time of doing this video, the bootloader is not unlocked on the US model, so you cannot install custom ROMs onto this device just yet. Performance is pretty speedy and snappy. There's, of course, an occasional slowdown due to the lack of full optimizations with Android on Samsung and AT&T's end. After a hard reboot, this device does have 2 gigabytes of RAM, but nearly 900 megabytes of those will be used after a clean boot, leaving you with a little over a gig to use for your applications. battery life is pretty good thanks to the large 2600 milliamp hour battery with most of the Android features left on, such as GPS, auto brightness, mobile data, and other things. I was able to get through the day with very little worrying. This phone lasts quite a while, so it's pretty good in terms of battery life. So I think that I've covered most of the elements to cover in this Galaxy S4 active review video. Of course, my full written review will be down below in the description. But to wrap things up, this is a fantastic phone. But for me personally, it's just a bit too large and it's a little bit difficult to hold with one hand. I'm used to the iPhone where one-handed operation is key. That's certainly not the case with this phone. But for the most part, it's a really good phone. It's fast, it looks good, the display is great outdoors, the cameras are good, the phone's waterproof, which is probably going to be important to a lot of people. But really, this phone, for me, just comes down to physical size. If you can handle using this device with one hand, or if you don't mind using two hands, then I think that you'll be very happy with the Galaxy S4 Active. So that's it with this video. If you have any comments, questions, or feedback about this or anything else, feel free to leave those down below in the comments area. But that's it with this video. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll talk to you all very soon.